No, it's fine. Oh. How do we turn this?
You can't just interact with that X? No. There you go. Giant keyboard on the screen. Yeah. That's all right. All right. Good. I'm going to start. All right. Welcome. We'll get started on time so we don't run late. So welcome. It's an unusually beautiful day, which is perfect for sitting in a room. So welcome, and thanks for coming. So we're going to go over today a little bit about psychology at Monash, what our program is, and first off, show you this inspirational video of why you should study psychology at Monash.
The human mind is behind everything we do. Every movement, every discovery, every relationship. When you study psychology, you don't just get a degree to hang on your wall. You get the keys to understanding the mind and unlocking people's potential. Studying psychology at Monash means you join a community of experts who are researching every aspect of the human mind. We're world-renowned for our breakthroughs because our researchers ask the right questions about all kinds of human behavior, from the characteristics we need more of to the ones we need to remedy. When you leave Monash with a psychology degree, you'll be ready to work in any field where understanding people is an advantage. And that's every field. You won't be asking yourself what a psychology degree is good for. You'll be choosing where you want to go with yours. The human mind is behind everything we do. Understand it, and you can do anything.
end of the program, now you know you can do absolutely anything with a Monash psychology degree. But we actually do have to go over a few things other than being inspired about the possibilities. A lot of people have some kind of wrong ideas when they start off in what psychology is, where they would go with it, what kind of career they would have. But some people have a very clear idea that is accurate as well. But what is psychology? So psychology is a study of mind and behavior. It's a very broad discipline, including all sorts of things: the brain, learning, memory, reasoning, decision-making, language. In psychology, I study, for example, how your internal body clock, your circadian rhythms. How many people have heard of circadian rhythms before? Almost everyone. 5 years ago, there would have been 3 people, and they would have been wrong about what circadian rhythms were, but we're famous now. I look at how disruption of these rhythms impacts decision-making and how lighting impacts your alertness, decision-making, and mood as well, which is why I came in here and immediately turned on all the lights, because I want people to be alert and engaged and not falling asleep at my monotonous voice. Now, I study that, but there are people who study all sorts of things, like how to change people's addictive behavior, or OCD. It's really vast. Anything that human beings are doing and thinking, whether it's problematic and how to solve problems, or if it is just to make people better at their work. So I did some work years ago. Before I came here, I was at Harvard Medical School, and I did these long-duration studies in labs, doing like 2-month-long studies. People would go in, stay in the lab all that time, and I would poke and prod them and test their cognition. And we did studies for NASA, for example, where we were adjusting lights and being able to get astronauts to not make mistakes and to perform optimally. So in psychology, it's really everything. It's not just solving problems and dealing with things that are problematic, like mental disorders and things like that, or neurodegenerative problems. It's also about optimizing performance, including the performance of our students. So we give some very good advice on how to perform well and learn to the best of your ability. So why psychology? Why Monash? So studying psychology will equip you with skills that are directly transferable to industry. So more and more, not just at Monash, but worldwide, there is a great push toward industry relations. And even in science itself, a lot of the funding in science is toward relationships between science and industry. So getting more immediate benefits from knowledge. So it's not just about learning things, and this is an interesting finding, and you kind of squirrel that knowledge away and write papers. It's about having more of a direct impact on the world. And one way to do that is to engage in industry. So we want to understand human behavior. At Monash, do well-developed research and analytical skills. It's amazing. When I first came to Monash about almost 6 years ago, I was very impressed with the students at the end who were doing honors, just how much skill they had in being able to write and being able to analyze and think critically. So there's a lot of fantastic training that goes into creating a Monash psychology graduate by the end. And I would say far more than where I did my undergrad. It pales in comparison. I won't say where I went and did my undergrad, but you can look it up later. At Monash, you'll get a balanced degree. So there's academia and research. I'm a researcher. I'm not a clinician, and I never will be. But I am a researcher. I'm very interested in basic mechanisms, especially related to circadian rhythms, sleep, and depression. And in that interest, I've been able to, within my group, discover new things. So we believe that we've recently found why certain kinds of antidepressants work and what the mechanism is. It's something you would think is solved, but it's not. And we think that we've solved that. And there are many other things within the group. That's what I'm doing. I don't know everything of what everyone else is doing, but I am constantly hearing about new, innovative, vanguard research that's going on at Monash. But we also have clinical research going on and clinicians who work with us. It is essential within a psychology degree to have such clinicians, and they serve that purpose well. And then we have industry. So we have very close engagements with industry. We work with certain companies. Our head of school even has gone public with a company to take some of her research in working with developmentally compromised children, and to be able to detect that compromise early and then to mitigate it by training certain cognitive domains. This is something that was used as a research tool, but with all of this engagement with industry, then became its own company and has blossomed, and now this essentially a brain training game for children has gone on, and it's spreading across Australia and will worldwide as well. So it is an interesting time in psychology that now we're much more easily taking what we're learning and sending it out in the world, having real immediate benefits. But as I said at the beginning, there are some myths about psychology. I know when I entered into psychology, I did not know what I was getting into. And I was lucky enough to find that it really satisfied a lot of desires for knowledge and creativity. But I thought it was one thing because I got most of my information from TV shows, and they were kind of inaccurate. But here are some myths. Psychology is easy. So some people think, oh, go to psychology, go into psychology, I'll get high grades, no problem. Another myth, psychology is just common sense. And certainly in some ways, you might read some article and you would laugh at how simplistic the conclusion is in some psychology study, but the vast majority of psychology is not common sense. Psychology isn't a real science, and in the early days of psychology, that might have even been somewhat true. But it is a hard science, and it's really obvious in the training in psychology. Any student doing psychology gets a lot of training in scientific method, in quantitative methods. So you really need to you need to have a solid science background to really perform well in psychology. Even if you're becoming a clinician, you need to be able to evaluate critically all the information that's coming to you. Myth 4, psychologists get paid lots of money to listen to people talk. I think that's true of some people. It's not true of me. I do all the talking, and I get paid okay. I'm not complaining. You can become a therapist with a bachelor's degree. Now that's not true. You can't. To become a psychologist, it's more years than just finishing an undergraduate degree. And we'll go over each of these quite quickly. So, there we go. Psychology is easy. That's easy because we can just skip right by that. But psychology is not just easy and common sense. It's quite difficult, and we answer a lot of questions in psychology that are quite the opposite. It's not common sense at all. How many people have seen the little? You can look it up on YouTube. There's this video of a little device that says brainstorm, or what is it? Green pin or something like that, where if you just think about the word, the sound is exactly the same, but if you think of the word, you'll hear one thing or the complete opposite. It's absolutely baffling. And you wouldn't know unless you studied perception and psychology what is going on. You can look at some of these visual displays. The black box one, you'll notice as you look at the center that some of the circles on the periphery look hollow. Does everyone see that? Yeah. This elephant is a little problematic with an odd number of feet. If you look at the display on the bottom, you'll see it actually moving, even though it isn't the bottom left for you. And then, believe it or not, for the bottom right, those two colors are the same. Now take your hand and cover up the middle where there's a gradient change. So just between the two, and you see that they're the same color? Right. So these types of things are only understandable. I'll let that blow your mind for a minute. Your brain is interpreting everything going on around you. I'll let you keep doing that. It's also true if you cut off my head, I look taller. If you want to do that. Your brain interprets everything in your environment. You've got in your head the most complex machine in the known universe, and we are hundreds of years away from really understanding everything about how it works. But these kind of little visual tricks give hints about how our brain takes this information and turns it into something that we understand and interact with. Now take a look at this picture here. Something's changing as it flashes. Anyone see what's changed? Well, one of these planes you wouldn't mind being on and one you wouldn't want to be on. Yeah, the much necessary engine disappears from time to time. Yeah. I will say I'm Canadian, and this is typical of the Canadian Air Force that they may or may not have engines on their flight. We don't put a lot of money into defense. Things like this, it's not just about tricking the brain, but it really gives insight into how we interpret our world. It's not as simple as, we're cameras or video cameras taking everything in as it is. There's a lot of interpretation. There's tons of information coming in at all times, and we need to be able to parse it and interpret it all the time. And I do a lot of work in first-year psychology on memory and how memory is faulty and how we make up memories that aren't true. And if you know a lot about human memory, you'd be absolutely terrified to ever be on trial for anything with eyewitnesses, because eyewitnesses are not very reliable, and let's just hope none of you get put in jail. But there's a history of kind of unusual insights into human behavior. There's a very famous old study by Milgram done in the 60s, where they basically took people and had them deliver a shock to someone. There wasn't really anyone they were delivering a shock to, and they didn't see them. But they were told to give a shock by an experimenter. So put on the white coat, they are an authority figure, and they're saying, you should go ahead and shock that person. They got that question wrong. And then they keep getting them wrong, and they turn up the level of the shock. And a surprising number of people would actually put that thing up to a point where it says, this person's going to die. This is a fatal level of shock. And people would do it. Ordinary people would succumb to authority. And it was something that was born out of the atrocities of the Second World War by the Nazi Party. And people were wondering, how can regular individuals engage in such horrific behavior? And so people were interested in understanding how people defer to authority and the things that people will do because of this deference to an authority figure. And it's quite shocking for everyday people. It's not obvious that people would do this, and you would think, knowing regular everyday people, that they wouldn't ever do that, and you would think that you would never do that. But it does happen, and these types of things help us understand more how people behave in different environments and different circumstances. Has anyone ever forgotten where they parked their car? But you didn't really necessarily forget where you parked your car. That's part of it. The problem with parking your car, especially for me, because I have unfortunately chosen the most common model of car in the most common color for that model of car in Australia. I didn't know that because I didn't do my homework. But your car looks like a bazillion other cars. And so it's really not just that you can't remember where it is, but it's a perceptual issue, and that these things look the same. It's hard to distinguish. Of course, I always take pictures of where I am, where I'm parked, and you should too. Now, memory is also needed for difficult perception. So in this case, up top, you've got two different women who look very similar, and two mountains, that perception problem. Just like before with the memory issue in parking your car, it's not just memory, it's perception, that these things are too close together. These cars look too alike to be able to remember it, because you can't perceive them as being very different. In this case, it's things that are perceptually very similar. You actually need to engage your memory. You can't just perceive that it's different. But these are just a couple of examples of thousands of things that we study in psychology that aren't always obvious. And now, especially in our school, but in the area of psychology in general, there's a real push to understanding early biomarkers of later problems. So just like our head of school has created brain training, a brain training system that can detect problems in childhood development, cognitive development, early and then counter it, there is a real push. I'm doing the same thing with depression. Other people are doing with dementia, trying to detect things as early as possible before it's problematic. I've now developed a new test. We're hoping that it's a test for vulnerability to bipolar disorder, and to be able to detect it early and then stop any episode from happening before it happens, because once a bipolar episode happens, it's easier to happen over and over again. So a lot of early detection and prevention as much as possible, or at least alleviation of the problem, is a huge focus of what almost all of us are doing on some level in psychology here at Monash. Now, myth 3, it's not a real science. I said in the early days, people like Freud would sit around and think about what the human mind is and come up with, id, superego, all this stuff, and he'd be pulling it out of his hat. But psychology is a real science, and in psychology here at Monash, we are actually also a neuroscience institute. So we're not just a psychology department. All of us are within an institute of neuroscience. So we're very, very focused on science and the brain. Okay? So, as I said, MICN, it's got 3 themes. So MICN is the Monash Institute of Cognitive and Clinical Neurosciences. And we have 3 main themes. There's addiction, which covers a lot of behavior, attention and memory, and sleep. Sleep I'm in. We do tons of other things, but these are the core research strengths of Monash. So we went forward years ago with a plan to figure out where are we strongest in the world, and let's build on these themes. If you're doing psychology at Monash, it doesn't mean that you're just studying these 3 things. You study all aspects of psychology. But these are the core neuroscience strengths here, and it's fascinating work. Now, we have Monash Biomedical Imaging. I do a bit of work here as well. We put people in this lovely scanner. That's not actually a window, but a visual display, an LED display, but doesn't it make imagining the experience a little bit better? I put people in here, but I don't use that display. I keep them in the dark, and then I blast them with light to see what their brain does. And it's good fun. So magnetic resonance imaging, you are really imaging the brain and how, usually it's a functional magnetic resonance imaging, and you're looking at how the brain and different areas of the brain respond to different stimuli, how they respond when you're trying to do some kind of task, a decision-making task, how these things are influenced perhaps by sleep deprivation, or what's different in how the brain responds to food in someone who is obese or not obese. We even have a researcher here who delivers delicious shakes or non-delicious things to people while they're being scanned. So they make decisions about what they want. Do they want this healthy choice, or do they want the delicious milkshake? And you look at how their brain responds, or how the brain responds when they're not getting what they expect to get. And I'm trying to add on to all these things, blasting them with light so I can see how that modulates everything. But there's just a ton of interesting stuff going on at the MBI. There are some top researchers in Australia working there, including a couple of people who are on the list of most highly cited researchers in the world. Now, here's a little video of the toys that every person gets when they come to the psychology.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay, that was weird.
This is transcranial magnetic stimulation. You can kind of turn on and off areas of the brain. So yeah, everyone gets one when they come to Monash. Not really, just in case there are people who don't get jokes. So it creates temporary brain lesion. You can turn off an area of the cortex or have it work more and look at how that area of the brain is involved in some kind of, it's not just getting people to count and then mucking up their ability to talk. There are other less fun things you can do with it. Now, myth 4, psychologists get paid lots of money to listen to people talk. It's the last thing I would want to do ever. Not that I don't like talking to people, but that's not what I got into psychology for. But there's a tendency to think, especially if, like me, you got your information about psychology from, there's a giant fly here. It wants to come to Monash to do psychology. So where do psychologists work? Private practice, that is an option. There are some people who are counselors and they, or clinical psychologists, and they work with people to help them solve the problems. It's a laudable thing to do, and certainly if you're doing psychology at Monash, that is one endpoint for you. But you work for corporations, education, government departments, health, welfare, hospitals, defense forces. Just like at the beginning when we saw the video, it's limitless, really, what you can do, except for getting flies off your face. Danielle, do you want to come up here and... Okay. What psychologists can't do is get rid... This fly is the biggest fly I've ever seen. And it's wintertime. Like, where did this thing come from? It's been living in here, gorging on the leavings of undergraduates, I think. Okay, so myth 5, you can become a psychologist with a bachelor's degree. That would be nice, but unfortunately, it takes more than that. So if you want to be a psychologist and work as a clinical psychologist, it's more than that. You could do your 3-year bachelor at 4th year as well, and then you would go on to graduate research degrees. So you really need that 4th year on top of the 3, and you can get that in different ways. But it's after your 4 years that you need to do further training to become a psychologist. And Danielle and other people in the booth next door can give you more information on that. Now, becoming a psychologist at Monash, you can do it in really three ways, or 3 streams. So I'm in the Faculty of Medicine, Nursing, and Health Sciences, and I'm the convener of the Bachelor of Psychology with honors. But if you wanted to pursue psychology, you don't just have to do that, a Bachelor of Psychology. You can go into a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. I think if you know you want to do psychology, then it's an easy choice to go into the Bachelor of Psychology. And there are benefits to that that are not in the arts and science. But if you're less sure that that's the path you want to take, then it's reasonable to perhaps do psychology in arts or science. So the 3-year sequence, although here we're going back in time, year 1, year 2, and then back to year 1 again. But in year 1, you've got just psychology 1A, 1B. It's 1st year psychology. In year 2, you'll do developmental biological psychology, personality, research, design, and analysis. And year 3, you do psychological testing, abnormal, perception, cognition, and research methods and theory. That's the core psychology sequence that you need to be able to eventually go on and become a psychologist, which is determined by psychology governing bodies in Australia. So everyone doing arts, science, or in medicine does that sequence. Now, we are going a little bit slow because I like to talk a lot, but the Bachelor of Psychology Honors is special in that it is a specialist degree with a guaranteed 4th year. Now that's a guaranteed honors entrance provided you hit minimum standard of 70%, which is really the lowest we can go at the university. Now the entry requirements for the Bachelor of Psychology, there's a clearly in ATAR of 85. It's offered on campus at Clayton only, but part-time or full-time. And people can answer more questions about that next door. So as I said, guaranteed honors entry, this is what the other programs don't have. And this is what is one of the things that's very special about our program. But we also do other things like internship training. So we do advanced research training. So Danielle and I put together this internship program where people in 2nd year on get to actually be scientists and go into labs and do their own studies with a lot of guidance, but actually get a sense of what psychology research is like and be hands-on. And it's been a wild success. So many people have loved it. They didn't realize what research was until they got their hands dirty doing it. And it's just changed a lot of lives and opened eyes to what they can do. Now, I'll skip the honors. Honors is a long way away, but basically you have your own big project and you work on it all year long and in the end come up with a thesis. It's a time of great fun, but also a little bit of stress because it's on your shoulders to get things done, but we have a lot of supervision to help out. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention at the end, another thing that's special about our Bachelor of Psychology through the Faculty of Medicine is the Monash Psychology Impact Placements. And Danielle, could you say for a couple of minutes a little bit about that? Because Danielle was really in charge of putting this together.
Yes, hi. So essentially what we've done is we've put together a placement unit. So for credit, we get students to go out into different workplaces. As you can see, there are several different streams, we call them, where you can be placed into various different areas that represent how diverse psychology is. So for example, we have some students going overseas to Sri Lanka to work out in communities, doing work within schools with clinical populations. We've got some students this year who are going into our psychology clinic to be working closely with our psychologists. We have some going out into industry as well who will be working with various different areas, so that can be in like HR, working in areas like where we do a lot of psychological testing is a huge area of psychology, good money, and also in research as well, where we get, so kind of like what we were describing, where we put students into research labs and give them hands-on training to be a scientist, we also have that opportunity within the placement unit. And there's another one there that's not mentioned, which is out in community health. So one is where they're working closely with families in the sector of disability, which is a really growing area, and that's another domain that is represented within this unit. That's what it's kind of looking at the moment. There is plans. We want to really grow this area. We know that the future is to really try and give you guys as much hands-on experience in your undergraduate training as possible. That's something really unique to Monash. Nobody else is really doing that in Australia at the moment. It's quite unusual for psychology at undergraduate level to be getting practical placement style experience. It's really left for postgrad. So that's one of the really fantastic things about coming to Monash, and it's only for Bachelor of Psychology students. So another reason why you benefit from doing our course is you get access to this unit, whereas if you wouldn't get access through arts or through science.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. So I'm over time, but I could answer a couple of questions before anyone kicks me out of the room. If you have any. Yes? So with the units 1A and 1B, what sort of stuff is covered in Oh, well, it's very generalist. So we've got developmental psychology. I teach learning and also memory. There's history of psychology. In Psych 1B, there's quite a bit of research design and analysis. So to give you a nice basis for understanding the quantitative nature of psychology. What else, Danielle?
So we also have abnormal psychology, perception. So those really cool kind of visual illusions that we showed you. We really delve into like why is that happening. We also offer personality as well. So you learn a little bit more about Freud, social psychology, kind of really giving you all the foundational knowledge you need to then go into more detail in your second and third year. So in 1A and 1B, you'll get a broad understanding about the whole of the picture of psychology.
And just maybe one or two quick questions. I know people have other places to go. Anyone? Yes?
I did Psych 101 a long time ago.
Yeah?
I had pracs, 3-hour pracs every week.
Yeah, pracs in first year. Yeah, so we have consultations, but not pracs or labs in year one. So we do have kind of it's sort of a flipped classroom in first year, enhanced blended learning we call it, where you do a little bit of reading ahead of time, you come into the lectures with a little more knowledge, and then do things in the class on a higher level, and a lot of those are interactive kind of programs.
Statistics, there was a lot of work done in statistics.
Yeah. Yeah, so half of our Psych 1B is research design and analysis. So there's a fair bit in Psych 1B. There's none in Psych 1A. Another question over here? There's another question? Yes. How long are the placements? So the placements, are they 6 weeks?
So for the placement unit is about anywhere between 80 to 100 hours, and that can be either in an intensive period or over 3 months.
Great. Yes. Yeah. So do we have transfers? Yes, we take transfers. So someone can start in arts and science, and if they want to, they're sure, yes, psychology is for me, and I want into the 4-year program, they can transfer in, provided they're in good standing. Yes. Yeah. So you're not stuck if you can't, if you choose arts and science. Okay, I think that's good. There's the booth next door where people can answer questions. I'll stay behind until I'm kicked out for a couple minutes if you have a question for me.
There is on video. Just wondering if
This thing here?
It
I
is
know
a
we
video.
were trying to get rid of it before, but we
Oh no,
couldn't.
this is a video.
everyone. Thank you for your patience as I ran to get my laptop just now, but I think we're only a couple of minutes over, so let's kick off straight away. So thank you very much for coming here today, and welcome to the Open Day presentation for psychology at Monash. I think I've spoken to a number of you, and that would be why I'm losing my voice, so please have a bit of patience with me, but I should be able to get through okay. So my name is Leah Braganza. I'm the Deputy Director for Education for the School of Psychological Sciences here at Monash University. I'm also course convener for one of our fully online programs. That's a graduate diploma in psychology online. And before we get into the main part of the presentation today, I wanted to let you know a little bit about who I am and my journey in psychology, and essentially how I ended up here today speaking with all of you lovely people. So when I was in high school, this was a very long time ago, back in Western Australia, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to focus on. I knew I wanted to go to university, but I didn't know exactly the course that was right for me. So just like you're doing here today, I went to a number of different information sessions. And to be honest, I know it sounds cliche, but I went to the psychology one, and from the moment that I heard about the different types of things that a psychology curriculum covered, I was pretty much smitten. And as I said, I know it sounds cliche, but it's true. And that was all the way back in 2003. And ever since then, I've been either studying or working in the field of psychology. So that's about 15 years so far. So I currently teach here at Monash, as I mentioned before. I'm also doing my PhD research on the neurobiology of obsessive-compulsive disorder. So that's a little bit about who I am. And I wanted to also add that it's so exciting to see so many of you guys here today, because psychology is a relatively young science, and there's still so much we don't know about the brain, the mind, and human behaviour, what drives it, what motivates us. And so in this very room, there might be the next generation of future psychology researchers, clinicians, and educators. So with that in mind, let's learn a little bit more about psychology at Monash. Let's play this video.
The human mind is behind everything we do. Every movement, every discovery, every relationship. When you study psychology, you don't just get a degree to hang on your wall. You get the keys to understanding the mind and unlocking people's potential. Studying psychology at Monash means you join a community of experts who are researching every aspect of the human mind. We're world-renowned for our breakthroughs because our researchers ask the right questions about all kinds of human behaviour, from the characteristics we need more of to the ones we need to remedy. When you leave Monash with a psychology degree, you'll be ready to work in any field where understanding people is an advantage. And that's every field. You won't be asking yourself what a psychology degree is good for. You'll be choosing where you want to go with yours. The human mind is behind everything we do. Understand it, and you can do anything.
So what is psychology? So put simply, psychology is the study of mind and behaviour. It's a very broad scientific discipline, and we investigate a number of different things underneath the umbrella of psychology. So we investigate the brain, learning processes, memory, motivation, emotion, mental health and well-being, personality, our identity, genetics, the biological basis of behaviour, developmental psychology. There are literally so many different areas to focus on in psychology, and a degree in psychology here at Monash, you get exposed to all of these different areas. So why psychology and why Monash? So studying psychology will really equip you with directly transferable skills to industry, such as having a really deep understanding of human behaviour, having well-developed research, critical thinking, problem-solving and analytical skills, and the ability to communicate complex ideas really effectively. At Monash, you're going to be learning psychology from the world leaders in the areas of our specialised research themes: addiction, attention and memory, and sleep. And at Monash, you're going to get a really balanced degree that will give you a foundation springboard into a number of different areas to pursue a career in academia or research, in the clinical setting, and also in industry. So what we're going to do now is actually debunk some myths in psychology. So we're going to go through a few of these. So firstly, that psychology is easy. Second, that psychology is just common sense. Third, that psychology, well, it really isn't a real science. Number 4, that psychologists get paid lots of money to listen to people talk. And number 5, that you can become a therapist or psychologist with a bachelor's degree. So, the first one, psychology is easy. So when you hear the term, when you think about what psychology is, you may picture in your mind the image of a therapist. They might be sitting in a clinic, they'll be listening to somebody speak, and they'll be, umming and ahhing and saying, yes, tell me more about that. And absolutely on the surface, that is what it might look like in the clinic, and becoming a therapist is one part of a career in psychology, but psychology is actually much more than that. In addition to learning all of those skills like active listening and how to effectively help and treat psychological disorders, you're going to be learning so much more about the brain, about the mind, about personality, about identity, about cognitive biases, about all of the things that makes us who we are. And all of those things, in addition to the content areas, you're going to be learning about the psychological methods that enable us to do research in those areas. And I think, especially when I was in undergraduate, I had no idea how complex and how challenging psychology as a discipline actually was. And I think that's one of the first kind of myths that's dispelled in psychology as an undergraduate. But to be honest, that complexity and that challenge is one thing that really, it drew me to psychology. And that's why I've spent the last kind of 15 years still in this field. So what about our next myth? So psychology is just common sense. So after hearing about, the latest psychological research you might hear on the news, you might just think, of course, it's just common sense. Why do we bother researching some things in psychology? Because it's obviously true and it's just common sense. One of the other kind of main things that I learned when I was studying psychology is that sometimes things always aren't as they seem. So let's do a little bit of a demonstration here. So I want you to focus on this first grid up here on the screen. So if you look closely at that, I want you to try and focus on the black dots. So who's brave enough to tell me what they see, or whether they can focus on the black dots in this first image up here? Yes. Correct. There are no black dots. So our perception of this is called, it's a variation of the Hermann grid. It's an optical illusion, and there are actually no black dots in here. But by design, when we try and focus on one of them, we can see them in our peripheral vision, but there's actually no black dots. So how about this second one, the elephant? How many legs can you see? Is anybody brave enough to let me know? Yes?
Well, if you look at the toes, there should be 5, but the lines make it look like, the lines judgmentally make it look like there's an odd amount of legs.
Yep. So we've got 5 and potentially more. Anybody else want to take a guess? How many legs does this elephant have? Okay, let's go through it together. So there is actually only one complete leg on this elephant. So if you look here, the top of this leg here joins to the body, and it's got a full foot here. Hopefully you can see that from my mouth. Yep. But here, for the second leg, there's no foot. Similar for here, where it joins up to the top, there's no foot. And same for the last one here. But the way that the artist has drawn it, we think that there are more legs, more complete legs than there actually are. Okay, so for this third one here, what colour is this top panel? Grey? Yep, consensus. What about this bottom one here? White. Okay, so what I want you to do, from where you are, I want you to stick your finger out and block the middle section between those colours, where they join. You might have to use 2 fingers depending on where you are. What happens when you do that? What colours are the panels? What can we see? Yeah. They are the same. And what colour do they both show? Grey, absolutely. Okay, on to the next one, and then we'll explain a little bit. Now, this one is a little bit trippy. I won't keep it up for long. But if you focus on this, kind of with your eyes, you know, go from left to right and up and down, what happens? What's happening to these circles? They're moving. But are they actually moving? No. But it absolutely looks like they are. I think you'll like the last one the best. I'm going to let this play for a minute. Okay, so what do you notice when you look at this? Can you notice anything different between the images? There's 2 images playing here. Does it look pretty much the same? Yeah, same, no real difference, no. What about here? Do you see it now? So what's missing? Propeller. Yeah. So the first time I looked at this, I thought, is this a trick? Is there something wrong with these slides? But no, the propeller's missing. So I'm just going to go back to that one while I give you a little bit of summary. So what this shows is that, you know, even at the most basic level of our perceptions, sometimes things really aren't as they seem. And what our brain does, what it's really masterful at doing, is looking at the whole picture and filling in the gaps based on lots of different things, including what we expect to see. But really, at the heart of it, what our brain does is we reconstruct reality. So some things, even though we think we're being 100% accurate all the time, sometimes things really aren't as they seem, and we don't have 100% accurate representation of reality. So what have we got? Okay, so myth number 3 is that psychology isn't a real science. So let's talk a little bit about what a science is. So some key characteristics of a science is that we use empirical methods, we use hypothesis testing, we design experiments that are able to be replicated by other labs to hopefully falsify what we find. We allow for objectivity, and we carefully control and manipulate variables. So these are some key characteristics of a science. And we rely on all of these types of methods when we investigate psychological topics in the School of Psychology. And to give you a little bit of information here about MICN, so MICN stands for the Monash Institute of Cognitive and Clinical Neuroscience. And it is the largest grouping of cognitive and clinical neuroscientists in the Asia-Pacific region. So our mission is to improve the understanding of the human brain through innovative research approaches and to directly and actively support the use of knowledge in the clinic and in the workplace, as well as by industry and the community. So MICN, we really pride ourselves on our key research themes, and they involve and that is in the fields of addiction, attention and memory, and sleep. So I want to take you through some of the different facilities that we have here at Monash. So the first one to highlight is the Monash Biomedical Imaging Facility. So here we have a magnetic resonance imaging machine, so an MRI. We also have an electroencephalogram, so an EEG, and also a TMS, which stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. So we have a number of different facilities here, and if you become a student in Monash through undergraduate, perhaps through placement programs, and certainly in subsequent degrees, you may have the opportunity to use these for your own research. So a little bit more on an MRI machine. So an MRI machine looks something like this here. So essentially it's a big magnet. Part of my PhD research was to scan individuals in an fMRI machine. So you put them in there, they're all locked in, they have to stay completely still, you're not allowed to move at all, and a big magnet rotates around your head. It's very noisy, but at the end of the day, what we want to try and get from scanning participants in MRIs are images of their brain. So here you can see, relatively clearly the structure of a human brain, and here it highlights the function of the human brain. So part of my PhD research was to look at brain function in individuals with obsessive-compulsive disorder and also problem gambling. And using fMRI techniques is one of the best ways that we can do that to look at brain function. Oh, another video here. So I'm going to play you a video of what happens when we use TMS, so transcranial magnetic stimulation, on a particular part of the brain.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay, that was weird.
Wow. What did you think of that? Yeah. So what this does, it applies electrical activity on a specific part of the human brain. And look, it's actually a very interesting technique because it's completely safe, painless, and temporary. So what you just saw there, that's only, it kind of temporarily induces a kind of brain damage in that particular region of the brain. And it's a really interesting technique. We have a number of research studies using TMS, but please be assured that we very carefully follow all of the ethical guidelines, and volunteers are very carefully selected for these projects. But techniques like TMS, in addition to being a great way for us to find out more about the structure and function of the human brain, it can also be used in treatment as well. So repeated TMS to particular areas of the brain implicated in depression has been shown to alleviate symptoms. So it's a fascinating technique. So this next one, psychologists get paid lots of money to listen to people talk. So we touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of the kind of work that psychologists do. And definitely listening to people talk and using talk therapy is one of those things. But psychology is much broader than that as well. And in terms of how much money individuals get paid for becoming a psychologist, it really all depends on how much education you have, where you've specialised in, and how many years of experience. But I want to give you a bit of a snapshot for the type of areas that psychologists end up working in. So certainly we all know private practice is number one, but also much more broadly than that. So government departments in terms of policy, health and welfare, hospitals, rehabilitation, youth services, defence force, counselling, non-profits, research institutions, in education, universities, schools, career services, market research, other professional research organisations, recruitment. So there's a huge diversity here in terms of where psychologists end up. I like to say that we're everywhere. Okay. So I think this next one, the myth that you can become a psychologist with a bachelor's degree, I think that's one of the main misconceptions out there in terms of psychology, because we actually need a lot more. You actually need to study for a lot longer than an undergraduate bachelor's degree in order to become a practicing psychologist. So what does that look like at Monash? So this first part up here, that just represents a 3-year undergraduate degree. So you need to do 3 years in undergraduate psychology. Then you need to do a 4th year. So that takes, say, 1 year full-time, and that would be an honours in psychology. After you've done an honours in psychology or some other 4th year program in psychology, you will then need to go on to do graduate research studies. So in the School of Psychology, we have a number of different PhD programs. So if you are more interested to, say, go down a research career, you might just do a straight research PhD after you've done an honours. But if you're interested to become a practicing clinical psychologist, you would do one of our clinical psychology programs or clinical neuropsychology programs. And the duration of these is about 3 to 4 years for that graduate program. Now, to give you a little bit more detail about the different pathways. So the slide before just had on the top Bachelor of Psychology with Honours, and that's the program that we offer through the Faculty of Medicine, Nursing and Health Sciences. But you can also major in psychology through the Faculty of Arts and the Faculty of Science. Now, if you're very interested to do a lot of psychology and neuroscience, the Bachelor of Psychology might be a good option for you because that is filled with more neuroscience and biomedical subjects in addition to the core psychology content. If you want a more generalist degree and you want to do other subjects like, say, philosophy or history, sociology, in addition to your psychology major, Faculty of Arts might be for you through the Bachelor of Arts. And the same with science. If you wanted to do more chemistry, math, physics, in addition to the psych major, then you could do it through the Faculty of Science. But all of these different pathways, we end up doing the same core psychology content. And this is the APAC-accredited major. So in year 1, you're doing psychology 1A, psychology 1B, and then in year 2, we go into a little bit more detail into some of these areas, doing some developmental, biological, personality, and in all of these units, you're going to have a component of research methods and statistics. And then in year 3, the type of subjects that we're doing include psychological testing, you're going to be abnormal psychology, perception and cognition, and again, some more research methods and statistics. In addition to our on-campus offerings, we do offer 2 online options. So the Graduate Diploma in Psychology, that's for mature age students. So if you have a degree in something else and you want to retrain, change careers and, say, become a psychologist, you could do the Graduate Diploma in Psychology online. The Graduate Diploma in Psychology Advanced, that's a fully online 4th year option. So even if you did an on-campus undergraduate degree and wanted to do your honours project online, you could do the Graduate Diploma in Psychology Advanced. Okay, so let's talk more about the Bachelor of Psychology with Honours progression map. So we have up here all of the different subjects that you'll take in the Bachelor of Psychology with Honours. As you can see, we've gone through the core psychology content a couple of slides ago. In addition to that, you're going to be doing more biology, more neuroimaging. You're going to be focused on sleep and circadian rhythms. So as you can see here, there's a very heavy focus on psychology, neuroscience, and biomedical science. You also have some elective subjects here that you can take, and these can be taken from any area. So you still have the chance to, learn about other things like, history or something from art, something from business or science. You do have that elective option. In the green, that's a psychology elective that you can choose. So that could be another neuroscience subject, or it could be something else like counselling. We have the 4th year up here because the pathway for the Bachelor of Psychology students does include that 4th year, and we can go into the marks that you need to maintain in order to progress straight on to 4th year in this program. But the type of subjects that you'll be covering if you do end up in this program, you'll go over the ethical and professional issues in psychology, more statistics, more research design still, psychological assessment, and the biggest difference here in honours between honours and the undergraduate is the thesis component. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well in a minute. So these are just some examples of the type of areas you can choose your elective from. So we went through some of those before. In terms of entry requirements to get into the Bachelor of Psychology, so you need a study score of at least 30 if in an ESL English or 25 in any other English. and an ATAR score of 85. And it's offered on campus at Clayton only, and you can do it full or part-time. It's just some admin details of that. Okay, so how does the 4th year work? So you are guaranteed entry to honours from year 1 of the Bachelor of Psychology if you maintain a 70% average in your 3rd year core psychology subjects. If you get to the end of that 3 years and you haven't maintained that 70% average, you're still awarded a Bachelor of Psychological Sciences, and you can apply for entry into other 4th year programs. So for instance, the Graduate Diploma in Psychology Online has a slightly more lenient entry requirement, so you could apply to that, or of course other universities. So let's talk a little bit more about honours itself. So the main objective of honours is to provide you with that research experience. And the other really important thing about honours is if you want to progress a career in psychology, you need to complete this 4th year program. So that's if you want to go on and do a PhD or a master's or a clinical PhD, you need that 4th year. So what's involved in honours? So in honours, in addition to doing those core psychology subjects, you're going to get to design your own research study. If you do it on campus, depending on what you're interested in and the type of supervisors that we have, you could be collaborating with a multidisciplinary research team. You could be using some of those cutting edge technologies that we covered before, fMRI, virtual reality, TMS. You will be communicating your results to your colleagues, potentially the media, if you find some interesting results. You'll be writing a thesis, and really this is the start of your career in psychology. So what happens after honours? So honours really is the gateway into further study and particular careers. So if you wanted to go into research after doing your honours, you could have a research career in neuroscience, psychology, or the biomedical sciences. And the type of organisations you might be working in include universities, hospitals, and research centres. If you wanted a more clinical career, so if you did want to become that psychologist, you would need to go on to further study. So you would either need to do a master's or a PhD in clinical psychology, clinical neuropsychology, or counselling. So that's more study. Or you could go directly into industry, and the type of areas include education and training, health and safety, digital economy, marketing. So lots of different options there, lots of different doors that are opened after completing that 4th year. But no matter which kind of undergraduate pathway you do, so if you did the Bachelor of Psychology or majored in psychology through the Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts, you still end up in that one on-campus psychology program, if that's what you wanted to do. So there are different pathways into the same program. And in terms of the on-campus option, that's offered here at Clayton, Sunway in Malaysia, and it's 1 year of study full-time. Now, beyond honours. So we covered this very briefly before, but the types of study pathways available are the PhD, so that would be if you're really interested to do a research career. The Doctor of Philosophy in Clinical Psychology, so that's the clinical PhD if you wanted to have maximum options. So if you wanted to perhaps become a clinical psychologist, but also possibly work in research in academia, you would do clinical psychology. Same with the clinical neuropsychology PhD. And we also have master's options in psychology as well. And that's more if you don't want to focus too much on the research side of things, if you really want to become a practicing psychologist. And the last thing to cover today is this wonderful program we have called the Monash Psychology Impact Placements. So I'm just going to play a little video for you first of that.
We recognise that psychology can make an enormous contribution to the world we live in roles well beyond professional practice in psychology. We've developed a suite of impact placement streams to highlight key areas in which psychology graduates contribute.
Through the Impact Placement Program, I went to Sri Lanka and undertook a mental health placement with SLV Global. We carried out projects in local schools, children's villages, hospitals and psychiatric facilities, teaching English or running creative and therapeutic activities for individuals with mental health issues or special needs.
Extended Families Australia is a non-for-profit organisation here in Victoria that assists young people with a disability via support work and service coordination within the National Disability Insurance Scheme framework. My placement had me helping extended families with organising events and other promotional work.
My placement enabled me to put theory into practice, especially in regards to planning activities and understanding developmental, social and cultural psychology. It gave me some insight into what working in the field of mental health might be like, including both its rewards and challenges.
Through my placement, I gained a full understanding of what the NDIS is and its impact on families that have a child with a disability. My hands-on experience allowed me to clearly see how both clients and organisations are coping with this system change. I've practiced skills and engaged in activities where I otherwise would not have had the opportunity, and I've learned how to apply these skills in employment contexts.
This opportunity has allowed me to develop professionally and grow my leadership, communication and teamwork skills. It also taught me about cultural awareness. I developed a true appreciation for the Sri Lankan culture and the mental health challenges and needs that are unique to this community.
Through the Impact Placement Program, working alongside the many support coordinators, I gained a better respect and understanding for the whole disability sector in general. I'm very thankful to extended families and to Monash University for having provided me with this opportunity. Finding a way to get this practical experience would otherwise have been a great challenge.
Our Impact Placement Program creates opportunity for psychology students, for education and research, for the clinic and for the community. Together, we're making a real difference.
So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for your attention today. And please let me know if you have any questions at all. We'll be around for the next... Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And Anna is here to help.
Anyone got any questions? Put your hand up and I can... Yeah. You're not too... You're nice and close.
Hi, could you tell me, is the Masters of Counselling APAC-accredited?
Yes. And that's offered through the... What?
No, the slide was actually the wrong way round. The Masters of Counselling is not APAC-accredited. You become a practising counsellor. The Master of Professional Psychology is APAC-accredited. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
You all want to get out and get going? All right, we'll take questions down here.
Yep, absolutely. We'll hang around. Thank you.